deceit upon deceit upon deceit, and these are all techniques of not just an occasional liar. These are techniques that a person whose whole existence is based on deception must deploy to get away with it. And in their last obstruction of you, they're even if they don't get away with the lies, they're just going to deny you representation. You see, so these are all techniques of disinformation, and the worst kind for the worst reasons, which are destructive to Canada and result in the persistence of this failure, which is manifested in Canada. And there's countries like Australia which are doing better relative to the rest of us, and bravo to the Australians, but they're suffering the same kind of currency, and it multiplies artificial indebtedness into terminal debt at a slower rate. So the Australians could say, well, let's just sleep on it a while. But, diligent Australians are, fully aware that they're going down the same route here and quickly as well. But, all right, next phrase.
Yeah, I think the issue with the Australian banks, though, is that they're more public banking with limited interest attached to it. I think
they have a little bit better
so
regulation, but the obfuscation of the currency still exists, and it still has the same. All you have is as I've said, regulation can only moderate the inevitable terminal failure. So it doesn't matter. If they have better regulation or whatever, it's as if we said, if we said in 1970, for instance, in the United States, that no bank could charge more than 0.5% interest, and my computer models then would calculate the maximum possible lifespan for 0.5% interest. And to my amazement, we could get to about the year 2050. So, it only gives you, whatever, 30, 40 years of further lifespan, and Australia has suffered higher than that. They're going to fail. They're just a few years behind us on the curve is all the difference is, you see.
Mm-hmm.
So the regulation is really irrelevant. It's as if we had less corrupt bankers here or who said, let's charge less interest, So anyway, next phrase.
Where do we go? Moreover, the government must continue to pay interest on its debt.
Well, there you are. Instead of explaining why government. Now, first of all, it's a lie. What he's actually, what he said there translates to, in terms of facts, is the people must pay interest on the debts the government creates to finance its affairs through a central banking system and this obfuscation of the currency. So he just says that all that's justified without justifying it, which is why I've said, because this is the pattern that holds for all government, there is no justification. You can't dig that justification up because none can exist. If anyone even offers one, it's only going to be a partial set of facts where, some of the truths might be cited in some obfuscated way that it appears to service it, but not accounting for it. You have to account for the entirety of the math, and that means going back to the beginning. What is actually going on here? No money comes into creation unless we issue a promissory obligation. We agree to a promissory obligation. We simply let the banks publish the evidence of that as if that makes it a debt to them. They never give up any lawful consideration. They pay $1 to issue $100,000 of evidence of our promissory obligations to each other into circulation. They give up $1. They want $100,000 back. There is no lawful consideration. That is not even a legal contract by United States law. Does not even exist. You see. So, obviously he knows he's wrong. Or, on the other hand, let's give him the greatest benefit of the doubt. Okay? He just doesn't know what this crime is. Okay. But if that were the case, he would take up your interest with you in getting to the bottom of the question, in answering it. And if he doesn't have that for you and is not willing to go there, which obviously in his answers we can see, there is no intention whatsoever to give an accountable answer to anything here, you see. Mm-hmm. So we know this person is a criminal, an intentional criminal against us.
Oh, and the intention comes out in the next sentence. The interest rate on the debt corresponds to the price of borrowing, and it is a discipline on borrowers, including governments.
Exactly. So this is why this explanation of the promissory obligation is so important for us to understand, as I gave in my parable of perfect economy so long ago. We had a man who grows fowl and a man who grows feed, and the man who grew fowl issued a promissory obligation to the man who grows feed, and he would provide so much of his chicken production for the extra feed if this man would grow it for him. When those promissory obligations were fulfilled, they no longer exist, and rightly no longer exist, because they no longer represent an obligation to fulfill the promise, to provide so much wealth in return. So the natural life cycle of a promissory obligation is to retire principal from circulation, and the whole fact of the matter is you're not borrowing money from a bank. The bank didn't have this money. It's only when we go to issue a promissory obligation that the bank intervenes and says, no, Mike, you cannot issue your promissory obligation to Karl on your paper. It has to be written on our paper. That makes it different somehow, you see. It becomes a debt to us. That's our opportunity to impose this lie that it's a debt to us. And so we launder all the principal that's ever created into our possession, and then as if that principle existed in our possession, which it didn't. It was merely created as evidence of Mike's promissory obligation to Karl, but yet as if it existed as our possession or evidence of our wealth, which we haven't earned because we never produce anything, you see. We never gave up anything of value either. That lie of that the principal represents our possession justifies interest on $100,000 falsified debt to us, when in fact we only gave up $1. So the $300,000 or $400,000 of interest that we're going to pay is justified, is what this guy is saying, because that's the cost of borrowing, when the fact of borrowing doesn't even exist itself. You see? And so what is the simple math of this? This is not a matter of opinion. The bank gave up $1 to issue $100,000 into circulation, to launder that $100,000 into its possession as if it had given up such a thing to the debtor, who is actually just the obligor who's issuing his promissory obligation to the builder of the house. You see? So it denies the real creditor interest. It doesn't pay you who built the house, the $300,000 in interest. It steals it all for itself. That's all the whole system is about. And the only thing, and all that is so unjust, it's preposterous that anyone stands for it, But the only thing now, to the discredit of the world, the only thing now that's forcing us to do anything about it is the fact that lie, that deception, that purposed obfuscation of the currency is terminal. You see, whether you recognize this thesis of inevitable terminal failure at all, you're experiencing it everywhere around you,
Yeah.
And so there's no denying this from the evidence or the pattern. He's merely pretending that this pattern is justified so that he can go on his merry way in perpetrating the theft, you see. So this man has no integrity whatsoever. He's a carpenter who puts together walls with no nails in them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree, Mike. And I'm hoping that
probably we
folks
ought to
out there are actually listening to about this and understanding exactly, because to me, what you've said, I understand anyway. Some of it may be above some people or some listeners' heads. What you're saying right now is the nitty-gritty of it.
We're actually applying it to an actual situation of life, and and the actual case of representative government. And this is I have personally provided every president since and including Gerald Ford a proposition of mathematically perfected economy. Not only the presidents, but most of the candidates. Any candidate who is even remotely plausibly conducive to this has got a proposition of mathematically perfected economy, and that means Lyndon LaRouche. It meant Ron Paul. It meant Dennis Kucinich. It meant Barack Obama. Before they were president, Bill Clinton. All of them, and I've even been personally introduced by the best friends of candidates, so that I could provide my proposition to them personally with a personal handshake and a few words, and after extensive introduction by their friend, and I mean, if you think these people are for us, what you really need to realize is, government is this opportunity to exploit a central banking system is the greatest weapon of mass destruction which ever existed, in monetary history. It is it is an abomination which desolates everything that relates to it, everything that it can affect, and it's to the great discredit of humanity that it endured a first Great Depression, but to not have learned and to not recognize the consequences of this obfuscation, which compel learning, and not to learn thereafter that in fact there is one and one only solution to all these injustices which are imposed by this obfuscation, that is inflation, deflation, and maldisposition, systemic manipulation of the cost or value of money or property, and thirdly, inherent, irreversible, and therefore terminal multiplication of artificial indebtedness. If that's not enough to compel you to spend, a few evenings, an evening, to understand that, mathematically perfected economy and this prescription for immediately transforming any lie of economy into mathematically perfected economy, not only immediately, but even virtually without cost, is our only way out of this, and it is the only way out of all this, is to actually participate in the crime, however inadvertently, against the rest of us, because in truth, as subjects of representative governments, we have obligations to each other to act responsibly on this critical, terminal issue. We say across the world we all are entitled to our opinions, and that's true. We are entitled to an opinion, but we are also responsible for the ramifications of our opinions in representative government. So it's not simply a right to think anything, however recklessly, and no matter what the ramifications of it are. We also have a responsibility to each other. We are keeping those 100,000 children on the streets of Los Angeles under the age of 12 who are homeless. We are keeping them there by our own indifference and lack of dedication to resolution, which the founders of every republic anticipated would be the destruction of republic. We are actually our own worst enemies because of our indifference and indisposition to recognizing and acting on actual solution.
Yeah, indifference I don't think is the actual issue, because when I spoke earlier on about people's crusades and causes, this is one of them. The homeless children, the homeless people, many, I've spoken to a couple of them actually through a CNN contributors chat group few years ago now, and one in particular was based in San Francisco. The guy was all gung-ho. His crusade was protecting the homeless of San Francisco and Los Angeles. But I explained to him, you are trying to fix a symptom.